tonight one of the strangest stories to come along in a long time. A group of American Indians has taken over the town of Wounded Knee in South Dakota, and they have been holding it for nearly a whole day. This afternoon, the FBI said the Indians are in charge of the town.
And you charge a white man premeditated murder. You charge him with second-degree manslaughter. And we ain't going for it anymore. And I know this whole damn town is an armed camp.
Hey, listen, white man. I have had all the bullshit from your race as I can take.
Wilson molested Indians, sometimes threatened them. So before the sun set, we want him out of office, and there will be no trouble.
We are going to reject any kind of condition that pushes us out of the Wounded Knee area until all of the issues of the Oglala Sioux are met.
Well, there's been a lot of accusations made here lately, and one in particular that upsets me is the fact that I am using a goon squad, so to speak. They are respectable and honest citizens with fine rigs. Well, sharpshooters, come to goon squad. Let's go and get them.
Senators, my morning prayers to the great mystery always include you and your colleagues in Congress, as well as leaders in all governments. It is an honor to come before you as a spokesman for my people, the American Indians of the United States of America. In these United States of America, this great country of ours, we American Indians, we can be anything we want to be, except American Indians. And that is created by the laws of this nation and condoned by its subsidiaries, the so-called tribal government, and designed for the Indian to fail, to be expendable, to be eliminated. I take you back in your history. After the American Indian hostiles had been subdued and forcibly confined to Indian reservations, it took approximately 30 years, one generation, for us to adjust and become economically viable. Contrary to what the anthropologists say and what we even ourselves are taught as Indian people. However, allotments were made smaller, our remaining lands were open to homesteading, and we were forced into reducing our livestock. Nevertheless, we made the adjustment again in less than half the aforementioned time. 15 years, and become economically self-sufficient again. But once again, the American Indian was forced into reducing our livestock. The boss farmer concept was instituted. We were told what, when, where, how much, and how little we could grow. This applied to agriculture and our livestock. Again, we recovered in a time span of approximately 15 years. We were so successful in our third recovery that the American Indians enjoyed the finest of economic times, while the rest of the industrialized world was wallowing in the Great Depression. It was then that President Roosevelt introduced the Howard Wheeler Act, better known as the Indian Reorganization Act, the IRA, which institutionalized the so-called tribal governments, which are not one of our institutions. And it is still foreign to us this very day. We have yet to recover.
In 1972, the American Indian Movement sponsored the Trail of Broken Treaties, a caravan to Washington, D.C. Our people came hundreds of miles from all over the country, the old and the young, many tribes, from many Indian nations. We came to protest our living conditions and other indignities, like sterilization of our women. There were many disappointments, but what happened at Arlington Cemetery was the worst. We wanted to hold traditional religious ceremonies at the graves of two of our Indian brothers buried there. Ira Hayes had helped raise the flag at Iwo Jima in World War II, and John Rice, a Korean veteran who they wouldn't bury in an all-white cemetery in the Midwest town where he died. The authorities denied us religious freedom They said we couldn't hold our ceremonies. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is supposed to protect Indian people, had become the enemy. We took over the building and stayed most of the week. In the end, the government called us militants and said we vandalized the building. They calculated the damage in dollars and cents, but they couldn't compute the heartbreak and loss of dignity and freedom of Indian peoples. After what happened in Washington, the people, especially the Oglala Sioux in South Dakota, began questioning the government's control of their lives and their land, schools, hospitals, and their support of a tribal government that didn't represent the people. They organized a demonstration with the help of American Indian Movement against the brutal killing of Raymond Yellow Thunder at an American Legion Hall in Nebraska. Then Sarah Badhart Bull and a delegation went to the Custer Courthouse in South Dakota to demand justice in the murder of her son Wesley by a white man. Requests were ignored in Custer, and things got out of hand.
Amatakwepe. Mimalakota. Imagina hão aqui existe hoje pai que lê resapa aqui. Lilo wakan. Mitaki e ate tashunka witko tios pai. Mitaki e ina wambli zuya tios pai. This is a traditional greeting of my people that I am bound to give. This is a traditional greeting of my people that I am bound to give. Albeit, it's a short version. What I said in my own language translate into English thusly.
Hey, listen, white man. Hey, listen. Hey, listen, white man. Hey, listen. I have had all the bullshit from your race as I can take. Hey, listen.
The American Indian Movement, or AIM, was formed in 1968 out of the realization that Native people in our country here suffer a 43-year life expectancy compared to 65 plus for the rest of America. Recognizing that the infant mortality rate amongst Indian people is 5 times the national average. This brought about because of inadequate health care provided on the reservation, legal responsibilities spelled out in treaties never being met. Education, average education per Indian person is 5 years or less, and again, contrary to a legal responsibility that the government of the United States has, as spelled out in various treaties. When we see suicide rates in excess of 20 times the national average, when we see substandard, inadequate housing provided on the reservations for our people, when we continue to see the gross injustices in the courts of America, were contributing to a fact that the prisons of America are populated by 20, 30, 40% Native people, even though we represent 1/2 of 1% the total population. When we see these kinds of conditions, in 1968, the American Indian Movement formed by Indian people, decisions made by Indian people to bring about corrective changes in American society, and in doing so, then bringing about corrective changes for Indian people and all mankind. One thing we have to understand is that the American Indian Movement is first a spiritual movement. It is said that many are cleansing themselves from within. Many have returned to the old religions of our tribes, the traditional religions of our tribes, away from the confused notions of white civilization
that has made us slaves of our unguided lives and consequently bringing about the total destruction of our civilization, or efforts to totally destroy us. This has not happened. By virtue of the fact that it's a traditional spiritual movement first, and then a political movement second, all tribes have rallied around the American Indian movement. We have, and it's estimated that 90 to 95% of the total population of close to 1 million native people in the United States totally support the American Indian movement. It is said that in Canada we are gaining strong support. It is said that throughout Mexico, throughout Central South America, native indigenous people who recognize what Wounded Knee represents and recognize what the American Indian movement represents is standing in our support.
The goals set by AIM leaders were support for the reformation of tribal government, as well as bringing attention to the injustices done to Native American people. Russell Means, as an AIM spokesperson, requested congressional investigations into conditions on all reservations and the corruption of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Means specifically wanted a hearing to take place concerning treaties and treaty rights. News of the takeover reached U.S. Marshals at Pine Ridge, and they placed roadblocks at all entrances to Wounded Knee to prevent access to the area. U.S. Marshals and FBI agents set a total of 6 roadblocks, along with 5 observation points throughout the occupation to keep people from entering or leaving Wounded Knee.
And it's here on Searching for Stanley where we first see Stanley Pottinger in real life. Initially, the government flew in J. Stanley Pottinger to deal with the negotiation process. As Pottinger made his way out to Washington to deal with the crisis, he commented on the situation, stating that he was concerned as a negotiator that the option I represent to negotiate a settlement not involving force has come to an end. These veiled threats from Pottinger came as residents who had been ousted by the insurgents threatened to make a move against the protesters.
By April 24th, a negotiation team returned to Wounded Knee, led by Kent Frizzell. The U.S. government still preferred to negotiate with the AIM forces rather than resort to any aggressive attack. On May 5th, Leonard Garment, consultant to the president, sent a letter to Frank Foolscrow. The letter stated that White House representatives would meet with the Teton Sioux in order to examine the 1868 treaty. This meeting would not take place until the dispossession of Wounded Knee occurred.
Although Frizzell had led the negotiations up until the dispossession of Wounded Knee, it would be J. Stanley Pottinger who would handle the aftermath. The Baltimore Sunday Sun reported on April 8, 1973, Mr. Frizzell, who negotiated the settlement with Indian leaders, said Mr. Pottinger will replace him as the government's primary spokesman once disarmament terms of the agreement are carried out. By Saturday, April 21, 1973, Stanley Pottinger's rhetoric had increased. In an article entitled Optimism at Low Ebb at Knee, it states, Assistant Attorney General Stanley Pottinger painted one of the gloomiest official pictures yet of federal government's chances of dealing peaceably with the Indians who have held off their forces at Wounded Knee for 53 days. The article also states that times for talking with the militants may be ending, and the government would then have to resort to police enforcement. After the standoff at Wounded Knee ended, there would be a lot of police enforcement. 2 years after the occupation, one might ask, why has the government spent more than 2 years and millions of dollars trying to convict these people? Why is the government continuing to prosecute after over 80 cases have been won on acquittal or dismissed by the court? Why has a reign of terror begun in which 11 people have been killed at the Pine Ridge Reservation in the past month alone? Why were over 20 American Indian movement leaders arrested within 48 hours of each other last March?
To me, it's not true. It never was, and it never will be. I'm brought up to believe that this thing doesn't happen in this world. You know, in this country or the other countries are outside of the world, but not this part of the world. And so it's such a horrible thing that maybe I don't want to believe it, you know. But to me, it's not true. She never died. She still exists.
I'm Annie Mae, and that's Kamuk Banks in the dark shirt. We made the statement when we were arrested in November 1975. We are proud of being born Indian.
We are tired of watching our people die of injustice in this country. We pledge our lives not to tolerate that abuse anymore. And if we are killed in the struggle, we will die with pride, knowing that our children are that much closer to victory.
She don't want to be beaten by white people, by white men. She'd rather be free, free in spirit and free in heart for her nation. That's why they found her dead. And that's why the FBI cut her hands off and sent them to Washington, D.C. for fingerprints. And that's why they buried her remains at a Catholic cemetery in the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation with no name on the grave. When they told her family it was Annie Mae, they said, well, she died of exposure. She had froze to death, but no. Independent pathologists found she was shot in the head, shot in the back of the head right here. Close range. They found her in a blanket. Half her face was bashed and she had no teeth. That's the kind of attitude Annie Mae didn't want her children to live. She didn't want her children to grow up and face that attitude.
The United States, once again, through its violence-prone attitude, its love of guns, its love of violence, will cause the shedding of blood. It is not over. The deaths of Indian people and our fight for our rights will continue.
In the 3 years following the standoff, Pine Ridge had the highest per capita murder rate in the country, resuming a quiet war. 2 FBI agents were among the dead. Today, the Pine Ridge Reservation is the largest community in what may be the poorest county in the entire United States.
Together we're going to walk up to Wounded Knee, where 50 years ago our parents, our relatives stood and sacrificed their lives for us. So today we could have our braids out, we could speak our language, we could have our ceremonies. We're not afraid to be who we are out in the white world.
While Pine Ridge is no longer occupied by federal troops, the war against the Lakota Nation is still ongoing. Since the major issues that triggered the occupation went unaddressed, people living on Pine Ridge suffer some of the worst living conditions in the country. Pine Ridge Reservation is a food desert, with the nearest grocery store 80 miles from it. This means that residents of the reservation have to travel 160 miles just to buy fresh fruits and vegetables. On top of this, Lakota residents of Pine Ridge face an unemployment rate of 90%. Without jobs, 97% of families live below the federal poverty line, and the average median household income ranges from $2,600 to $3,500 per year. The average life expectancy for Lakota is 47 years for men and 52 for women, far below the average national life expectancy, which is 76 years.
I felt like the spirit, the energy brought us here, you know, me, for sure. And I was looking for something, you know, to validate ourselves, you know, our own self-searching. And in a time when it wasn't good to be Indian, in my time, you know, or my youth. And so, for better or worse, you know, I realized that you have to be who you are, you know, and you should be who you are.
The federal marshals had all the high grounds, and we had bunkers and support teams down here in the middle, and trading post was over here in our security headquarters. And so it's all gone now. You know what strikes me about it is as soon as it ended, the federal people came in and they bulldozed all the main structures and buildings here. And I think they were trying to erase this out of history, that it would go away and people would forget about the massacre that happened originally and the rebellion that happened here again, because people haven't forgotten. And so coming back here, I think, is a way of rebuilding that struggle and the structures and the fight that took place here to keep the memory alive and to care for future generations. And so this is a real strong statement, I think, today, everybody being here for the 50th anniversary, the ones of us that are still around.
Mistakwepe. Mima lakota. Imagina hão aqui existe hoje pai que lê resapa aqui. Lilo wakan. Mitaki e ate tashunka witko tios pai. Mitaki e ina wambli zuya tios pai. This is a traditional greeting of my people that I am bound to give. This is a traditional greeting of my people that I am bound to give. Albeit, it's a short version. What I said in my own language translated into English thusly.
Hey, listen, white man. Hey, listen. Hey, listen, white man. Hey, listen. I have had all the bullshit from your race as I can take.
Shaping a great reset for the post-corona era.